This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm David McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
And we couldn't screw up the order of reading our names this week because it's just the two of us. So we've got some really interesting news this week. Let's get right into it. This kind of was breaking just as we were recording the show last week, and so we didn't get to mention it. So our apologies if you've been spending the week reading about this already. But there is some exciting news about a long deceased composer, Igor Stravinsky, a favorite of most composers today. And that is that there's some new music by him, which is amazing because he's been dead for a long time. So how did this happen, Sam?
In a back room. It's amazing whenever you read about this stuff, how it turns up. Because because like I have piles of scores here and there and lose stuff under stacks of this and that and the other. And it's amazing that, you know, that's the way it goes for everybody. It was found in a stack of old manuscripts in the back room of the St. Petersburg Conservatory, which is not surprising. A piece from that was believed to be destroyed in 1917 when the conservatory itself was damaged during a civil war, but it has been found in a stack of stuff. It's a piece that he wrote when Stravinsky was only 26. I'm going to give it in translation, the funeral song.
That's reasonable. I don't think either of us are gonna break our backs trying to say this Russian correctly.
Right. So he was, you know, fairly young in his career. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't have thought so, considering he wrote an autobiography when he was 31 or 32, right? I'm sure he thought he was in the fullness of his greatness at that time.
Yes.
So this was.
I mean, I wonder about the quality of these kinds of pieces.
Well, I mean, only 4 years or so after this, he would do the Firebird, Petrushka, and the Rite of Spring. So if he's not, you know, he's at least seeing something great, likely, if he hasn't actually gotten there yet. And plus, it's a funeral song. It was written for Rimsky-Korsakov, as in commemoration after he passed away. And so with that kind of piece, I don't usually expect a certain kind of super insightful greatness, because even a composer like Stravinsky can write a functional piece of music, one would hope, you know, that serves its purpose as, well, a funeral song, quite literally. So I'm very anxious because it was performed at least once, and but it was thought to be lost as far as the score goes. So I'm sure there will be a performance staged and hopefully recorded sometime very soon.
Yeah, it's one of these works that we only know exists. Well, before this, we only knew existed because of references to it by other people talking about this piece that Stravinsky had written. So it's very cool that we have it. I think it's of probably more interest to scholars, to music theorists and musicologists who want to, you know, do some analysis of this work and see what it says about Stravinsky's developing style. As you mentioned, this is just a few years before his first big ballet that he would later become, you know, one of the war horses of the orchestral canon. And we have this very, very early example of his writing that we didn't have before. So that's pretty interesting. I am not sure that it's going to be known as one of his great works. It will be very cool to have it reconstructed, though. There is some reconstruction that has to happen, right?
I'm not sure. I don't think that the article that I'm looking at goes into that. I could be wrong.
So we'll definitely be on the lookout for some recorded performance of this. I'm sure as soon as there is a performable version of it, we will have no shortage of scholars trying to recreate period appropriate performances.
Absolutely.
With their
period appropriate, where we won't
cat
cut straight. We won't let women play in the ensemble,
right,
etc.
And you must wear a cravat to listen to it.
A cravat. In a past episode, sometime in the past, I'm not sure how long ago this was, we mentioned the Bard Training Orchestra was going to become a thing. Conceived by Leon Botstein, the president of Bard and the director of the American Symphony Orchestra, conceived this idea as sort of a postgraduate training ground for future orchestral musicians.
The New World Symphony of the North.
Yes, the New World Symphony of the North. And
which sounds like it could be from the Game of Thrones if the Game of Thrones was a lot more boring.
Winter is coming. So yeah, we had some discussion about this when we first heard about the story. And wasn't there some controversy, or at least minimal controversy, about how this was sort of like an NCAA-esque harnessing the labor of students for professional performance kind of thing?
I think people may be able to make such an argument, but I think it's pretty reasonable. There are a limited number of orchestral positions available to graduating students, and it's good for them to have a way to get experience working in an orchestra like this before they can earn one of those positions. So I think it's going to be good. Yeah. The orchestra is smaller than I thought it was. This story says there are 37 players. I assume that is just because it is new, and as they grow through the years, they'll become a larger, 60, 70, 80 person orchestra.
Yeah, but, so they're not going to be staging any Respighi or Mahler or anything like that with 37 people.
No, but I think they should try. Anyway, they've announced their season. It looks very interesting. They've got some partnerships with some other cultural organizations, and I'll look forward to seeing what they can do. I've heard the New World Symphony. I live in Orlando, Florida, and the New World Symphony is on Miami Beach, and so I've gone to hear them several times over the last few years, and they're wonderful. And I can only imagine that a similar orchestra drawing from the talented universities in New York would be equally impressive.
Yeah. And they're doing, your typical, so you see Beethoven, Mozart.
A lot of Beethoven, a lot of Mozart.
A lot of Haydn, as to be expected. But there's also...
This is an orchestral academy. Like, part of the job of this institution is to prepare these students to play the repertoire that they are going to play or be asked to play.
And they're going to play the War Horses. And, they need experience doing the War Horses on like 1 or 2 or 3 rehearsals, because that's the way it's really going to go down. But there's also Ives and Prokofiev, Shostakovich.
I would imagine that as this orchestra grows, there will be a lot of new music. But for a brand new institution, commissioning is expensive. And so I'm sure they'll get there eventually. Certainly the New World gets their fair share of commissions here in Miami. And I can only imagine that is not far off, especially with the new music culture at Bard already.
Yeah. Ligeti Romanian Concerto.
There you go. I'm in.
There's lots of good stuff. I mean, you're going to get your War Horses, but there's some cool stuff also.
We'll send our New York correspondent, Patrick Gulo, to check it out.
That's right. Oh, doing Quiet City, actually. Hey. I'm just shuffling through the list now. Are they going to do it?
This is our recurring segment, Sam Reads the Internet on a Podcast.
That's right. Are they going to do the English horn version or the trumpet version of Quiet City is the question.
I don't know. There is a correct answer.
There is a correct answer. We'll see. So find out, Internet, and then let us know.
Another follow-up on a story that we talked about for, basically ever a couple of years ago is the Atlanta Symphony. And I was really hoping that we would not talk about the Atlanta Symphony very much anymore, but this is actually not scary labor news directly anyway. The Atlanta Symphony has a new president, Jennifer Barlament. So she's moving from the Cleveland Orchestra to Atlanta, and this is a pretty interesting development. There was a lot of animosity, I would say,
to
to put it mildly, in the last round of labor negotiations with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, and there was a lot of confusion at the administration whether we were talking to or about people supervising the orchestra and people running the larger Woodruff Arts Center, of which the Atlanta Symphony is a part. And there was just a lot of nasty things said in the press and directly to one another, such that the past president said that he had become too much of an impediment to working with the musicians, and so he just left. And this woman, Jennifer Barlament, is coming from I'm going to go with considerably more stable orchestra, which is a very low bar when we're talking about Atlanta. Atlanta's in a special category of their own, of dysfunction, but
yeah,
hopefully we'll get things headed on the right track.
Well, it's also to point out, if you remember, one of the things that really set that labor dispute apart is that Robert Spano, the music director, really overtly and publicly was on the musician's side, if you will. Like, right. he made no bones about it that he's on the side of the musicians, and said as such through social media and actual media. So yeah, she's taking over. She's taking over for Terry Neal, who succeeded Stanley Romanstein, who resigned after calling himself, quote, an impediment to the labor agreement. So hopefully this is just a sign that things are going to go forward. And, ultimately, I think because the economy is doing better, a lot of these labor disputes that have been sort of the touchstone of SoundNotion since its inception are kind of going away because the economy is doing better and the people have more money to donate to orchestras. Therefore, their money problems are going to become less and less, which is a good thing.
We'll see how things turn out. I think it's going to be for the better, but
tangentially related to that story, actually, I considered including this story in the rundown, but I didn't. But I'm glad they mentioned it in the actual piece in the New York Times about the Atlanta Symphony hiring. It mentions the fact that another orchestra who endured a lockout, and probably, I guess, the most epic lockout of lockouts, right? 16 months, Minnesota. Is that the biggest one that happened?
Well, I don't know. It's pretty big, but
I'm going to call them the record holder then.
I mean, sometimes they just shut down entirely, and so the lockout is practically
it's still ongoing.
Is infinite.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's a no news is good news kind of situation for Minnesota. Things have settled down, and they have ratified a new budget for this year, and so it's a no news is good news situation in Minnesota, which we like to see because they support new music, and that's good for us.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Speaking of new music, one of the things that we talk about on the show a lot is getting recordings of music. And we've discussed this a lot. And in particular, the value of recordings for transmitting new pieces to people that cannot attend performances for whatever reason, whether they're economical or geographical or whatever. And there's a first post on New Music Box this week from Kenneth Kirchner called Indeterminacy 2.0, How to Burn Your Harpsichord, which is why I clicked the title, because the idea of burning a harpsichord sounds fascinating to me. Despite the fact that you would lose your quite awesome harpsichord, I bet it would be really fun to watch and listen to. But anyway, the point is not about burning harpsichords. The point is that we have lost a lot of spontaneity and a lot of indeterminacy in music by our focus on recordings. And he brings up a really interesting point, is that we often talk about how wild music has indeterminate features, but we never talk about the opposite end of that. We never talk about determinacy, which is something that also exists in degrees. This whole thing is a continuum, And at one end of the continuum is a robot. And slightly before that is a live recorded performance that's never going to change every time you hit play. And I know, Sam, you've spent a lot of time thinking about this. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's the idea of thinking about creating a performance, because let's be clear, this is really just a teasing post, and I think it's a very effective teasing post, especially if Indeterminacy is one of your pet projects. So,
do you know anybody for whom Indeterminacy is a pet project?
Sam Merciers.
Huh.
So Kirshner has set up this situation. He apparently, and I just read this morning because Dave posted it on the doc, and I read it, and it's very interesting, and I'm going to do some research into this guy's music because I'm interested. And he's proposing the idea of making the actual recording, which making the recording an indeterminate thing, so that when you listen to something, it can change every time you listen to it. And that's interesting and not surprising, considering that when you hear a performance of a piece live, it is completely different every single time.
Right.
Because,
go ahead.
Because of all kinds of different factors. But when you talk about having something that's been recorded and it's on CD and you buy the CD, it is the same every time within certain parameters, which I'll get into in a minute. But he's proposing a way of producing recorded music such that every time you listen to it, you automatically get a distinctly different realization of whatever the piece is, so that the thing you're going to hear when you hit play is indeterminate within a certain set number of parameters.
Distinct, but it could be subtle, maybe.
Could be subtle.
Like a performance.
Yeah, well, that brings me back, even not just a performance, but there's not enough information here yet, which is why I think this is a great teasing article. We should try and get this guy on the show, because this is one of my things, Dave. Like, there is indeterminacy in every piece of music you ever hear, even if it's a recorded piece that you're listening to on CD. Because let's say you want to create the completely determinate piece of music. That means that if you were going to sell that piece of music, you would have to sell the medium on which it's transmitted, a CD or a hard drive or whatever, and you would need to include the system for playback, meaning like you must use this amplification system and these headphones or these speakers, and you must be in this environment so that it sounds exactly the same. I mean, I'm nitpicking, but composers are into nitpicking, right? When you hear a piece of recorded music, even if you're in your car or if in your office or if you're listening to it on headphones, that's a different experience. I think we would all agree to that, right?
Absolutely.
So there's an aspect of indeterminacy inherent in any musical experience where you're experiencing a piece, whether it's recorded or live. That's something he doesn't get into in this article, but I'm not gonna. I mean, I can't critique his analysis yet because he makes it clear that this is just an introductory teasing article. So we'll see. But
and I think it's important to acknowledge that when we listen to music today, the machine that we are using to reproduce that sound, at least for me, every single time I listen to any audio recording, it is being played back by a computer. Whether that computer is my laptop or my iPad or my smartphone, it is being played back on a computer. I never listen to CDs. In fact, I don't have a way to play CDs. A couple of my students, I felt really bad, had been working on recording projects this summer, and they brought back these CDs of these recording projects they'd been working on, and they gave them to me, which was very lovely of them, and I haven't listened to them yet. It's been 3 weeks, and they're just sitting on my desk because I literally don't have a CD player. I have no optical drives that are connected to computers in my house.
Yeah.
Or even in my office. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be taking advantage of that fact to bring some kind of audio experience that is going to change every time. there's a little bit of that in the 1-bit symphony that I have of Tristan Parrish. That there aren't, I don't think, any bits of indeterminacy written into the code of that piece. This is, by the way, for listeners who may not be familiar, 1-bit Symphony is written into a microchip, and you can purchase a copy of the whole, basically a very small, cheap machine for a little more than the cost of a CD, maybe about the cost of 2 CDs. It's not crazy. And it's a battery-powered thing that you plug your headphones into this device and turn it on, and it literally performs that piece from the source code from the binary when it is run, when you flip the switch and turn it on. And you got a little volume knob, and you can switch to the next movement with a little button, but that's it. However, I will say that at the end of the piece, it will continue going through this process. There is a loop in the programming sense, not the audio sense. There's a loop that continues on until you switch it off or until the battery dies at the end. And I will also add that I had a very interesting experience about 16 months ago or so when my battery in my copy of 1-bit Symphony was dying, and it was making some really interesting and weird sounds that are not the normal 1-bit Symphony performance. And I didn't think to record it, but I just replaced the battery like a dummy, and now I can't do that anymore. But this is, I think, the sort of thing, it's headed toward the direction of something that Kirshner may be talking about, where we can actually take advantage of computer code to maybe not synthesize audio necessarily, though certainly we could do it with synthesis, but to manipulate recordings live on the fly.
Yeah. Well, he's touching on something that, you know, because we now have digital recordings, we assume that indeterminacy is something that's not available to us. But let's be clear that when, in terms of just performance generally, indeterminacy is not something that is the sole, reservation of Cage and Boulez, etc. Indeterminacy is inherent in all pieces of music. There are, like Bach, for example, there's lots of indeterminacy, but there is a sort of agreed upon set of standards that fill in the gaps, and it's called performance practice. When you play a piece of a Bach piece, there's all kinds of things, even inherent in the notation itself, that's indeterminate, where it's not sure, you're not sure by just looking at the notation as to what's going to happen. But there's a tradition and a performance practice that tells you how you should fill in those gaps. But we don't have that in modern music with recordings. And he's proposing a way to reinsert that, what I consider an invigorating element, back into what otherwise is a sort of stoic and staid, cemented in concrete thing, which is an interesting idea, which is why we need to get this guy on the show.
Well, we'll work on that. But more importantly, we will have to follow New Music Box and read the future posts in this series.
Absolutely. So this was called Indeterminacy 2.0, How to Burn Your Harpsichord. So there's obviously going to be follow-ups in this series. So keep an eye out. And
it's a short little teaser, like maybe 700 or 800 words.
Yeah. It's a good bet that I'm going to be on the lookout for the next, and we will talk about it on the show.
This is a good read for in the line at the grocery store.
That's right. You can get through it on your smartphone while you're waiting for your avocados to be weighed.
Yes. So anyway, that's going to do it for this week's episode of SoundNotion. Thank you so much for watching or listening. It's a short one, but I had a good time. Sam, did you have a good time?
I did.
And we're going to continue doing this on Sundays. So if you would like to listen, you should subscribe so you can catch every one of these episodes. And this is not the only show that we at SoundNotion.tv bring you. No, we bring you more. Subscribe today to our other fine podcasts, Patch In, which is about electronic music, and Streamers and Punches, which is about film music, and all of our other fine podcasts, all the great shows at SoundNotion.tv. You can find them in the iTunes store. It would be really great if you would review them, because that helps people find us, because it raises us up in the search results on the iTunes store. So thank you very much for those of you who have already done that. And you can, of course, we would love for you to get in touch with us. If you have any thoughts on any of the things that we talked about today, you can get a hold of us at Twitter. We're at SoundNotion. I'm at Dave Mecdo. That's DAVEMACDO. Sam is at Housegoy, and he's thrown up his Housegoy gang sign for those of you that are watching the video on YouTube. But that is HOUSEGOY on Twitter. And we would love to continue these conversations with you there and build that community. Speaking of community building, I want to make a quick plug really quick. A quick plug really quick. See, I've been doing this for 4 years and I still can't speak in sentences. So there's a wonderful group community chat thing that happens on Twitter on Sunday evenings, hashtag MusoChat. It starts at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and you just follow that hashtag on Twitter and you'll see all kinds of stuff about it. I would encourage you to do that. It's a conversation among composers and performers and other people involved in new music. Definitely worth checking out. That's hashtag MUSOCHAT, MusoChat. So thank you for watching or listening this week, and we will see you back next time.
Go Vols. I haven't heard about MusoChat.